Virus pandemic is ravaging countries and affecting socio-economic activities. It is reported that tens of millions of people are being quarantined worldwide, with fears that the president set up a committee to look at the impact of the coronavirus on the nation's economy that has submitted its report. In furtherance of this cause is the Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, announcement of 6 initial policy response to combat the impact of COVID-19 on the economy. This comes as the World Health Organization hails Nigeria's proactiveness in curtailing COVID-19. Tonight, as a tradition of Entities Alive, we shall bring you reports from parts of the country. But first, this background report by John Ken Abokwa to set the tone for the discussion.
In December 2019, the central Chinese city of Wuhan witnessed the emergence of the novel coronavirus, which affected many people within a short period. This eventually became a global health threat, as it has led to more than 6,400 deaths, with about 160,000 people infected globally.
80% of the people that will get COVID-19 will have mild to no symptoms at all. About 15% will have more severe disease, but those people are usually older people or people with underlying disease like hypertension, diabetes, heart disease, people that are immunocompromised. In 5% of the cases, you'll have people that will have critical cases. So I tell people the first thing is don't panic.
Nigeria recorded its first case of COVID-19 in February 2020, and Lagos, being one of the nation's windows to the international communities, became the first access point. The state was ready to contain the virus.
For us here in Lagos, everything that needs to be done, we're doing, and we're ready. Our facility has been fortified to continue, if need be, of any form of tests and containment.
Since then, government has intensified public awareness and increased surveillance. The tracing, tracking, and isolation of those who had close contact with the index case led to the prompt identification of the secondary case, a Nigerian in Ogun State. Less than 3 weeks after, the secondary case has tested negative, while the index case is in a stable condition. However, a third case, this time a Nigerian female from the UK, has been confirmed in Lagos.
We have a 30-year-old Nigerian who went to the United Kingdom earlier on in the month, and she returned on the 13th of March after a 10-day stay in the United Kingdom. We've started the contact tracing process. Thankfully, she obeyed the instructions and she confined herself to her home, where she's only been in contact with her immediate family. That helps us tremendously because it limits our contact tracing to the manifest of the flight, which is BA75.
As authorities continue to ensure that coronavirus does not spread across Nigeria, it is imperative for all to stay safe by adopting proper hygienic practices. In Lagos, Joy Ken Abakpoya.
We take another report put together by Benny Adams.
Economy is said to be an object in motion. This lends credence to the fact that the last few weeks have been disruptive for the financial markets and the economy, owing to the fact that events starting in Wuhan keep spreading globally with not enough knowledge on preventive, curative, or even its spread. While the first vaccine is being tested, it might not be available for a while. This uncertainty alone instills anxiety and even panic that is spreading faster than the virus itself. The virtual shutdown of one of the world's biggest economies has led to businesses around the globe slowing down, from multinationals to petty traders, as people have been asked to remain indoors. Factories shut down, travel agencies recording losses. Asians working in Africa who traveled for holidays could not come back to continue their assignments. Africans with businesses in China cannot travel for fear of the virus. so also many global business events being put on hold, owing to the fact that no country has immunity.
We have not put in place a travel restriction today or at this point in time does not mean that if the realities on ground dictate that even before the end of the day, that will be announced.
As figures of infection continues to rise globally and oil prices dropping to a global low of $20 per barrel, the United Nations Trade Organization, UNCTAD, estimates a global loss of $1 trillion to COVID-19.
For Nigerian crude, today we have about 50 cargoes that have not found landing, not found home. It means that the traders have purchased it, they don't know where to take it to. So when your crude oil sells at $30 and you are dropping it by $8, it means that in the market, you are selling it at $20. And that's a huge problem.
The question is, what then becomes of Nigeria's capital importation as more countries continue to shut their doors against each other?
After facing the realities of the health crisis, what we do expect is that there will be very serious economic crisis. Indeed, some are already saying that whether we like it or not, the global economy will certainly go into recession.
In words, the federal government seemed to have a solution in sight by firstly recognizing COVID-19 as a reality call to developing a non-oil attitude to everything we do as a country.
That report by Benny Adams at second report on the program sets the tone for the takeoff of the program tonight. It's Tuesday Live, and our focus tonight is COVID-19 and the global economy. At some point, our lines will be open and you put your calls through, and also our Twitter handle is at Tuesday Live NTA. Please, when your call pulls through, before you make your call, turn down the volume of your television sets through the calls, through the Twitter to your tweets. You raise your concerns, ask your questions, and our team of guests will address them. Focus again is COVID-19 and the global economy. Tonight, I have macroeconomic policy analyst, Professor Ken Ife. Good to have you on Tuesday Live tonight.
Thank you very much.
And also Director General, Nigeria Center for Disease Control, NCDC, Dr. Chikwe Ehekweazu. Good to have you on the program.
Great to be on your show.
Director General, Chief Executive Officer of the National Institute of Pharmaceutical Research and Development, NAPRID, Dr. Obi Peter Adigwe. Welcome to the program.
Yeah, thank you. My pleasure being here.
Well, COVID-19 pandemic is a developing story, evolving. It's yet to have a destination. I must say, developments come globally in seconds. So let me start with Dr. Chike Ehekweazu. What's the update since the last case was declared and now you're in the studio?
The update is we have 3 confirmed cases in Nigeria, and we've been working very hard to cast our net as wide as possible, following up on travelers coming back to Nigeria from countries that have been infected or that have more sustained community transmission of these infections, because those are really people most at risk of this infection. We are aware that as cases increase in other countries, that list will expand. So this evening, we are going to expand the number of countries that we are following up on people coming back to Nigeria, adding 5 new countries where the case count is now above the 1,000 case threshold. So people come back, we follow them up. If they're symptomatic, we take a sample, we test, and that's how we found the cases that we found in Nigeria. So one thing is the number of cases in Nigeria, which is 3 at the moment, and we're working very hard to see that we limit it as much as possible. But, we're also following the global picture, because this is not an outbreak in Nigeria. We're a small part of a global incident that has moved from country to country. Firstly from China, where we've seen the numbers come down radically after the first increase, and now the epicenter of this outbreak is in Europe. And that's really where our attention is focused at the moment.
So if I get you correctly, the case definition you talked about, the travel advisory initially was 5, now 8. We're taking off increasing it?
Yeah, so it's not a fixed, it depends really on where we are finding the cases, because the purpose of the case definition is then who do we test to look for this virus, because we can't just test everyone at the moment. We just don't have the tests available. So we have to define the countries most at risk of importations into Nigeria. So that was at 8 this morning, and just this evening we've added 5 new countries: the UK, the US, Norway, the Netherlands, and Switzerland. And those are the 5 new countries. Everybody coming back from these 5 countries will be asked first to go into self-isolation, and then followed up every day for 14 days to know whether they're well or ill. And if they are ill, we will send someone to their homes to get a sample, send it to the lab and test. We don't want them going to hospitals themselves, because hospitals are amplification places. If you go there with an illness, you spread it to the most vulnerable. So we'll actually go to you, take a sample, send it to the lab, and then inform you if you have the virus or not.
So how do you add up the latest development that the federal government bans all foreign trips for public and civil servants till further notice as recommended by the Presidential Task Force for the Control of the COVID-19?
Yeah, so the President has set up this task force, of which I'm privileged to be a member. And we met this evening. All the ministers are part of the task force. Everyone sat together. These are very difficult decisions. So we came out with the first set of decisions in the short term. Now, these decisions are not permanent. They will be evaluated over the next few days, discussed with different actors in the economy, and then we might decide to advise Mr. President on more actions to take moving forward. So really, this is a first step. Has to be seen as a first step. It wasn't just the ban on travel by public servants. Every Nigerian was also advised to defer non-emergency travel. So if you don't really have a life-threatening situation to deal with, you have no business traveling at the moment. We definitely also said if you're coming back from one of the 14 countries, this is not just self-isolation, we call it supervised self-isolation, because we are going to follow up with everyone that is back from any of these 13 countries I now listed. So the whole set of initial actions listed by government. But my last point really is, this is a call to action for all Nigerians. You know, there's so much government can do. But really, our appeal to Nigerians is each of us can take a personal responsibility for your own actions, your own participation in risky gatherings. The more we take responsibility, limit our engagement in gatherings for now, do the basic things we've been advocating for everyone to do around personal hygiene, hand washing, disinfectants, will solve a big part of the problem for all of us if we focus on these simple tasks that we as a society have to adopt as part of our day-to-day lives.
Okay, let me take on Dr. Adigwe. You are the Director General, Chief Executive Officer of the National Institute for Pharmaceutical Research and Development. Because of this development, we have what we call a challenge has posed itself: medicine security. There's a scarcity of it in the world. Where is Nigeria right now?
Yeah, so the medicine security concept is a concept we articulated a few years ago, which basically argues that unless a people are able to determine, how the medicines are produced, how these medicines are distributed, that particular population will not be able to guarantee a sustainable supply of safe, affordable, and effective medicines for their people. And the fact that this particular outbreak started in China, who in terms of medicines is like the world's manufacturer, has translated to a disruption in supply chains. So China manufactures APIs, that's active pharmaceutical ingredients, which they send to other countries who now manufacture the medicines from the APIs. And because this particular outbreak started in China and there was a disruption because they had to control their population's movement, factories were shut down and all that. That gap, that particular shutdown has now started to translate to a gap in other countries' ability to either manufacture medicines or import medicines for their own people. And for Nigeria, we're not where we're meant to be. However, because of certain decisions that this particular government made over the past 6-7 years, we're in a better place than we would have been pre-2016. And I'll give you specific examples. Before 2016, almost all the medicines that were being imported into Nigeria came in at a 0% tariff. Meanwhile, for manufacturers in Nigeria, they had to pay some tariff to bring in equipment and other inputs. And the Manufacturers Association called out to the government. Government was responsive. And in the 2016 fiscal policy, 4 categories of medicines were ring-fenced for local manufacturers to have an advantage: alkaloids, antibiotics, antimalarials, and hematinics. So what happened was that government listened to the medicine security cries of the local manufacturers, their argument that they had adequate capacity to supply Nigerians in these categories. And what government did was to place a 20% import adjustment tax on those 4 categories. And what this translated to within the industry was an expansion in the nation's ability to manufacture those particular categories. So if that particular intervention wasn't put in place by this government in 2016, you can see very clearly that we would have been in a worse-off situation. Additionally, other policies that government had put in place include Executive Order number 3 and Executive Order number 5. These are both executive orders that speak to increasing local content across the industry, across all sectors, as well as encouraging local procurement of locally manufactured medicines. I think that is Section 4F of the 3rd Executive Order. So these are all actions that government had put in place in line with the medicine security cause that has been going on across the years, which makes Nigeria in a slightly better position in terms of medicine security compared to its peers. But it's not yet a huru. A lot more needs to be done, and I think this particular outbreak is meant to be a wake-up call for everybody.
So given the circumstance, has that triggered any discovery by your institute?
Well,
because we hear the sanitizers are there, but not very much available.
Yes, well, so I wouldn't credit NIPRID for discovering the sanitizer. What we did basically was in reaction to the scarcity, and I mean it's not a Nigerian scarcity; it's across the world. I was surprised on the telly this morning in America. They literally had empty shelves. Even people like Louis Vuitton in Italy have come out to say they're going to start manufacturing hand sanitizers. Well, tell them that NIPRID got there first. So what we did in NIPRID was, when this shortage started, we said, how can we contribute to ensuring that the supply chain remains? And we validated and contextualized several formulas, presented a product developed within NIPRID to the Honorable Minister of Health, who now directed that we present this to Nigerians. And that presentation was very, very symbolic for several reasons. First of all is that it reassured Nigerians that there is capacity to do these things in country. Second of all, it stimulated an increase in the amount of other people who had similar capacity to come to the fore. So there is now a significant increase in either local manufacturers or other institutes that have the capacity, coming to the fore to say, we have also validated our own formulations, and they're inviting NAFDAC to come and have a look, to certify them so that these things can go into the market. So what that particular sanitizer issue was a critical step in, enabling us address the disruption at that point in time. And consequently, as you would probably know, the price has now come down and it is actually more available in pharmacies. We felt it was something, that was quite laudable, because as you know, just about 6 out of 10 Nigerians have access to water. So sanitizer is important. And the availability of the sanitizer, is a critical step that will help in helping to disrupt and control the outbreak.
It could be available. Is it also affordable?
Yes, I would say yes. And like I said, we're making a lot of effort to, it's economics. The more there is, the lower the price will come. In addition to the one that we product developed in NIPRIT, something else that we did was to activate artificial intelligence and machine learning capabilities to start to put together a database of local manufacturers that had excess capacity, which they can use to contract manufacture. So far, we have somewhere between 10 and 20 already validated, manufacturers that have excess capacity. As you know, industries are tooled to run 3 shifts. A lot of them run only 1 shift. So them putting their additional 2 shifts in the market and other people coming to engage, to use up those 2 shifts will help to make the supply, more available, and consequently the price will come down.
Okay, Professor Kenneth, I'll come to you. Let me take on
I'm fine.
Dr.
I'm enjoying the discussion.
Now, so much intervention has been put in place. Listening to you from various media platforms, radio, TV, social media, you have just been there. You and invariably the Minister of Health. You have said so much. What is the plan regarding the new wave now in mitigating COVID-19 pandemic in the world? Social distancing. What are the plans in Nigeria?
So, we're all in this together. No country can really be safe, even China, until the rest of the world is free from this disease, or it has reached a level of circulation that is no longer at an epidemic level. So we have to consider this not as something that will come and go in a few months, but something that will either be with us for quite a while or eventually until we get a vaccine that will limit transmission across the world. Which means, inevitably, that we have to really think about what we can all do ourselves. Social distancing is a fancy word for a few simple things that we're all encouraging each other to do. And it is a challenge for us as a society because most of our social norms encourage, very close greetings. Men shake hands with each other severally during a single conversation, not to talk about when I see you for the first time. We hug, we celebrate each other. And so it's very challenging to now say, listen, for as long as this outbreak is imminent, please let's not get as close as we have been used to getting with each other. It also means, and that's a personal responsibility, but it also has implications for gatherings. You would have seen that Mr. President just this morning announced the postponement of the National Sports Festival. We have come out with guidelines about mass gatherings that have to happen, enabling people to make critical choices. Mr. President may at some point have a view about mass gatherings altogether, but until he makes that announcement or decision, we came up with guidelines at NCDC to enable people make decisions on the gathering that they have and what to do. And some of these things you think would be obvious. You know, if you go to many schools in Nigeria with thousands of children in them, and you know, you find that they have 1 or 2 bathrooms and maybe 1 hand washing basin. So we really have to provide people the opportunities to carry out this personal hygiene that we've been talking about. And you know, keep a certain level of distance wherever it's possible, especially in venues or outside where you don't know who it is. So it's a complex social cultural change that we're calling on people to carry out for the next few weeks or months, depending on how long this goes. But this is really the price that we have to pay, and we have seen it work. You know, when I was in China a few weeks, maybe a month ago, to understand what they did in order to control that outbreak. This was really what they did. By stopping contact with each other, keeping people isolated if you're a patient, if you're a case, and really stopping any form of social gathering. It was a big price to pay, but it was because of that price that they're now able to restart their economy. And Dr. Adigo was talking about the impact of China in APIs. It is the same with almost every aspect of life, and they produce a lot. And so when the economy is not working, it's a big problem for China, but it's also a big problem for the rest of the world. So in summary, we have seen that it is possible, even when you have a large outbreak, to get it under control. We don't want to even have a big outbreak in Nigeria. So even if there was a case coming into Nigeria, we don't want it to have the opportunity of spreading. It cannot spread if there's nobody to spread it to. Okay. The virus only has the opportunity to spread if we're in close contact with each other, and then it goes from one person to the other.
Well, you can be part of the conversation tonight. Our focus is COVID-19 pandemic and the global economy. You can be part of the conversation through our phone call, our phone number displayed on the screen, also through our Twitter handle at TuesdayLiveNTA. Our first caller tonight is calling in from Lagos, Michael. Hello, Michael. Hello, Michael.
Hello.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah. Well, we need to lock up our countries. Other people are locking up, even Canada are locking up their countries, because this disease has an effect in our nation. Sometimes we know there are economic policies that government is ready to relate to others. But because of this disease, many people can die. We need to lock up our country as others are doing. Canadians have locked up their countries. Why are we still wasting our time in locking up our countries? Is it because of economic reasons? We can be able to look inwards and know that we can be able to handle our situation based on this problem. That is to show us that we need to look inwards and begin to patronize our local made materials. Based on the situation, we now know that our locally made materials is what we use to grow our economy. So we need to look up everywhere, and before our professionals who are in the pharmaceutical institution can research and know what to do, we need to look up our everywhere around our corner, because Chinese are locking up, Canadians are doing so. Why Nigerians have never done such a thing? So they are still selling, even in Dangote today, there is even a rumor that somebody came on 12th of this month with coronavirus. So to show that because how we live, we cannot be able to eradicate it if we cannot lock up our borders. To be able to eradicate it, we lock up our borders and check those foreigners who are within us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. Michael called in from Lagos, and on our Twitter handle, we have a couple of tweets here. Let's address them before I take on Professor Kenife. The first from Amalu Paul. It says, good evening. Please, what is the government doing to restrict the movement of Caucasians or Nigerians that have spent a good number of time outside the shores of Nigeria? Also, is the temperature check at our entry points reliable? That's one. Maximus 4455. It's either you focus on the economy or focus on the lives of the citizens. Nigerians want the border closed. Please, we will attend to the economy after the epidemic. The next one, quite a tongue twister name here. Now that the global economy is certainly going into recession, this is the best time we patronize our local homemade products for sustainable and rapid-based economy. I think that relates with what Michael from Lagos just said. Yusuf Saleh says, why is it difficult to restrict people coming from these high-risk countries? Neighboring countries had put travel restrictions from these high-risk countries. Why not Nigeria? Is it that Nigeria is playing giant of Africa, or what? Augustine says, the sudden emergence and rapid spread of a novel coronavirus, now called COVID-19, is a reminder of the power of infectious disease. What is the federal government doing in equipping our health centers in order to combat this virus? Let me allow you to react to some.
Yeah, so I think there are three key questions I'll deal with. The first one is if our thermal scanners at the airport are working. The thermal scanners are working very well. You may not see them all the time because some of the testing is passive. The important thing to know, it will only pick you up if you're symptomatic. So if you don't have symptoms at the point of entry, then the scanners themselves can't pick you up, and that's exactly what happened to the first case that we had. And it was then reported to us by an astute physician who took the history, understood that there was a travel history and the patient had symptoms, put these two bits of information together, let us know, and then the system kicked in and we were able to isolate that individual in Lagos, working together with our colleagues in Lagos State. A lot of the questions focused on restriction of travel. And we must trust our leadership to take the right decision. I am absolutely sure Mr. President is considering that among a variety of options with the situation both in Nigeria and the rest of the world, and will advise at an appropriate time on what the next steps are around restriction of travel. Until he does that, we have to do what we've always done and carry out the public health measures that we know what to do. Try and identify the cases as they come in or when they're in. Aggressively monitor all the contacts. Whenever you're symptomatic, take you into care. And that's really what we're doing. So really focusing on what is in our hands while our leaders take the decisions on whether to keep returning travelers coming in or not. The final question I'd like to spend a few minutes on is the question around infectious diseases altogether. You see, we're only in the third month of the year. We've had over 800 cases of Lassa fever. Nobody is talking about this. We've had 18% of those 800 have unfortunately passed away. We have been managing this outbreak in Nigeria. It hasn't attracted any media attention. Nobody on Twitter is talking about it. These are Nigerians that have actually died of a real outbreak that is affecting us right now. And we have been pushing on all of us to do this. Very soon, every year we have outbreaks of cholera, yellow fever. Now, there's only so much we can do. Whenever there's an outbreak of yellow fever, it's probably one of the most painful outbreaks that we deal with at the NCDC, because yellow fever is a vaccine-preventable disease, a vaccine that has been around for over 40 years. And yet, to get our vaccine coverage up to a level to protect Nigerians from these diseases is very difficult. You see states with vaccine coverage of 20 to 30% for childhood diseases that there have been vaccines available for years. And so sometimes I also look at the media uproar around COVID-19 with a little bit of I don't really know if we had the same amount of energy around Lassa, around cholera, around monkeypox, yellow fever, we would have been a much better society. So the one good thing I find coming out of this is an increased awareness on the impact that an infectious disease outbreak can have on all our lives, on our way of life, on the economy, and if it leads to at the end of the day, for all of us to take this a little bit more seriously. Government, yes, invest a little bit more, but schools, campuses, individuals, we all have a lot to do. So that's really what I hope to come out of this, while we focus very aggressively at managing the outbreak at our hands right now.
Well, let me, okay.
Really, I think just following on Dr. Ihekwazu's point, another area that has been greatly neglected by Nigerians is patronage of locally manufactured products. I'll tell you a story to drive this point home. I think it was Michael who called in that mentioned it, and then Austin has sent a tweet, also touched upon it. But it doesn't do justice to that particular topic. When we started validating some of the local manufacturers that indicated interest in joining our database, I heard some heart-rending stories from the local manufacturers. I think it was 6 years ago we dealt with Ebola. Local manufacturers, again, were called to say, answer the call, put up machineries, set up supply chains, build your people's capacity to produce hand sanitizers for Nigerians. And they answered that call. A few months later, Ebola went by, and what did they find? According to them, they've now had capacities and factories to produce hand sanitizers, but you now have hand sanitizers being imported from outside Nigeria. The importation of hand sanitizers between the time the Ebola outbreak ended to this particular period is 6 years of taking jobs out of Nigeria. It's 6 years of not using natural resources that we have in Nigeria. It's 6 years of debilitating our own economies by ourselves. This particular variant that was produced in NIPRID, product developed in NIPRID, is we sourced the raw material from the alcohol from a manufacturer.
Could you shift the glass so that we can have a beautiful,
from a manufacturer who has a plant in Kogi State. So his alcohol is sourced from cassava in Kogi State. The eucalyptus here is from Kaduna State. If this particular product or this type of product had been patronized by Nigerians, if Nigerians had for 6 years gone into a pharmacy shop to say...
Did you know about it at all?
Well, of course they do. Of course they do. You see, in this particular issue, we've carried out some preliminary research, right? And we find that there's certain people who still go to pharmacy shops and request for imported medicines. This is when you know that made in Nigeria medicines are of the highest quality.
Before the coronavirus pandemic moved from China to Europe now, where it is more prevalent, we hear they did some miracle. Certain things were solved within 7 days, 3 days, hours. So now that you have displayed this, is it late to mass produce it? What is keeping it off the shelves?
Well,
can we find it anywhere around the shops in Nigeria? Are they affordable?
Good question. I don't know the miracles they did in China, but in Nigeria we have procedures. So this is a product developed in NIPRID.
Dr. Ihekwazu is right here. Now we know that one of the primary concerns is hygiene in fighting against COVID-19 pandemic in the world. And one of the simplest things to use is sanitizer. This is one produced by a Nigerian, endorsed by our institute.
So there's just one more thing we need to do.
Procedure to mass produce it?
There's just one more thing we need to do, and we've started doing that, which is getting the NAFDAC number. In Nigeria, you can't put a product on the shelves without a NAFDAC number. If you do that, you're encouraging people to either fake your product or to, produce you sanitizers that have less than 60% alcohol. And once we get the NAFDAC number for this, you will start to see this on the shelves. So that's what we're doing. But going back to the point I made earlier on, this needs to be a wake-up call. As Nigerians, we're fond of only reacting when there is an emergency, and it's wrong. There needs to be a deliberate, volitional, concerted effort to manufacture locally and patronize what is manufactured locally. I hope by the time coronavirus ends, people will remember to do that.
I've kept Professor Kanive quiet for too long. Let me trigger you off with this. Now, the economics of what you have just said, can you explain further?
Well,
we have a case in our hand, and we are busy importing sanitizers.
No, it's
we have
brilliant
one
to hear.
Produced here, yet we don't find it in the shelves.
It's brilliant to hear that we have this product. And to be honest with you, I must confess, I spent a whole day Saturday looking for sanitizers in Abuja and I couldn't find.
During the CBN,
and I didn't have an idea that we have something
event
local.
Recently at the CBN hall, I think a manufacturer also posed this question.
Yeah, I know the CBN governor apologized
because sanitizers produced in Nigeria, yet nobody directs people to come to buy. We import. It's a serious issue.
It's true, but he apologized because we had some made in China tubs that was being distributed in the room, and you know.
You were there.
I was there. I was there. I was going to this.
So go ahead.
So you know, it's a pity. But again, I wouldn't know why NAFDAC will be delaying the registration of this. I don't know why it should.
No, they're not delaying it. They're not delaying it.
Because, and secondly, I don't think that even the NAFDAC registration is equivalent to patent. So you still have to patent your stuff. Because, you know, it's still not going to be patent. But but you know, I just can't understand why this is. The Presidential Order 003 is really about this. Buy local, you know, trade local. And I have been in the CBN over the 10 presidential value chains. And I was in one particular meeting where the Riot Act was read to all the uniformed officers, the Navy, the Army, the police, the NYSC, all of them on one side of the table, and all the manufacturers of garments from Lagos, Kaduna, and Kanu were all there. And we said, we've come to the end of this road. This is an MOU. We both must sign that. If you don't sign it, I won't give you any foreign exchange to import this anymore. And that's an order from the president. So, you know, and quite coincidentally, we have biotechnology that has given us seed, cotton seed that has increased from one ton per hectare to 5 tons per hectare. So, you know, billions have now gone out into planting more cotton, and the degeneraries are coming on stream, and the garment manufacturers are. But so it's happening. But it should happen with more speed. Absolutely. With what we have just produced. Yeah. So I think we should do more to patronize products of that nature.
Yeah. Now, back to the issue. I'll come to you on the economics of this. Dr. Hikwazu, with what Dr. Adigwe has presented before us here, does that challenge your sector? Given the circumstance on ground.
It's a big opportunity for us, you know. We directly...
But like I said, sorry to cut in. Yeah. Like I said, in China, when it happened, they did novel things within days to combat this virus. And today, they have gradually been able to combat it. It's whittling down. Now, he talked about procedure. Do we need to follow procedure to mass produce this, made in Nigeria?
There are certain procedures you have to follow, especially around drug manufacture, drug registration, because anything you're giving to patients to consume has a certain higher bar versus anything else. So Dr. Adigwe will recognize that some of these procedures have to be followed. They should be expedited, given that this is a government, parastatal, and institute owned by government. So you can take a few things for granted. You know, they're not going to cut corners for commercial reasons because they're not set up to make profit. And, you know, that using national institutions to drive areas for development of strategic national importance, whether it's cotton, whether it's military hardware, or whether it's pharmaceuticals. It's just not something we have done enough of generally. So within the Nigeria Center for Disease Control, we follow all government regulations in always looking for whatever we're buying, whether it's a service or a product, can we buy local? And it's only when you can't find local that we go beyond the shores of Nigeria. And we've innovated a lot. One of the innovations I'm actually proudest of is not a product innovation, it's a service innovation. So we're using a local private sector courier company at the moment for the transportation of all our samples. Because we have 5 labs, I've said this severally, only 5 molecular labs in the country. But we have a big country. So how the samples get from the corners of this country to these 5 labs? We've worked with a local courier company, trained them in how to package biological samples, which requires a certain level of expertise, how to track them, how to get them to the lab, and how to get the empty containers from the labs back to these locations. And we've become one of the most important clients of this local courier company that won this tender over all the bigger names in the whole courier industry that will be familiar to you. So these are things that we're doing. But I think in the whole space of health security, there's an important opportunity to now grow. This is just one of them. There are many other things, personal protective equipment, the gowns you see we wear, the masks. We are completely dependent on importing all of those things. And right now, with the challenges across the world, there are things that even money cannot buy you. Because firstly, China mopped up everything in the market. Now we have a big outbreak in Europe. They're buying up whatever is left. They have the manufacturing expertise to produce more when they need more. We are completely dependent on imports. So this is an area where we really have to work together with industry, identify areas of strategic national importance, where with 200 million people we can develop our own demand, because we have the market, we have the need, so we need to work together, tell our colleagues in the manufacturing side, this is what we need. We tell our colleagues in CBN, please support the financing for the bacteria, that we will buy the products. So I think there's a lot of internal economical engineering that needs to happen to make our country better. And if you listen to the determination of the colleagues on this panel, you feel that it is possible to make it work.
Well, if you're just joining us, it's Tuesday Live, and our focus tonight is the COVID-19 pandemic and the global economy. At some point, we'll be taking some reports, dotting the landscape of the country to see what people are doing and to mitigate this. But quickly, before we take those reports, I know that Dr. Ikweazu is quite busy. Let's take a few tweets that have come in again, and I've kept Professor Kenife
I'm
for
fine.
too long.
We have 2 hours to go.
Now, quickly, there's this one that says, Ehidiamen says, he says, Honorable Minister, I'm sure he's referring to you. Here is the DG of the National Center for Disease Control. Kindly clarify the case of the Dangote staff suspected to have the virus. The NCDC Twitter handle was tagged, but we still have no update to disprove or confirm this issue.
So this is a very simple issue. The Honorable Minister of Health has given a commitment, right, that we will announce every new positive case of corona. We have no benefit in hiding this, right? What we don't encourage is the public transmission of personal information, company information, which is basically what has happened in this case. So rest assured, if that individual ended up being positive for coronavirus, we would have announced it, or we will announce it. If it hasn't been announced, then there's only one conclusion to draw. But I will not, on national TV, tell you that Emeka Adewusi from Lagos in number 2 Ikoyi Road tested positive. No, we don't give out personal information about patients, about their companies, about their parents, about their villages. This is not the work that we do. We're here to protect the health of Nigerians, and the Honorable Minister of Health and the agency I lead are committed to be open and transparent to Nigerians with the information that they need to control the outbreak. So the Honorable Minister gives press briefings 3 days a week, every week, and has made a commitment that he will personally announce all new confirmed cases. So if that case has not been announced, rest assured that is not a positive case in Nigeria.
The last 3 before we take our reports, Abdulaziz Ibrahim says, should a student return to United Kingdom for continuation of his studies next week? Is it safe? What precautionary measures should he take at the airport to reach London safe? Roland Ogwara says, We have seen how this virus spreads in very developed countries, starts and trickles and grows exponentially. Please, travel restrictions should be put in place. It's a wake-up call, quite all right, but right now we should try as much as possible to reduce sources on entry. Obinna Kelvin says, since the scanner can only detect those that are symptomatic, that means that those who are positive but asymptomatic would not be detected. Is there no risk of transmission from these asymptomatic carriers? Maybe the last one.
Yeah, so let me start with the first tweet about. Can you read the first?
Yes, the first one talked about
going to
should a student return to United Kingdom?
So we have advised already that all non-essential travel should be restricted. So sometimes the state imposes bans, but sometimes it also starts with advice and then moves towards a ban. So I don't think you don't need to be tied down with a rope in order for you not to do the right thing. The second thing is, schools are probably closed in the UK at the moment, so I don't actually see what the rush is in traveling back. So advice, and the Honourable Minister has been very clear on this, is postpone all non-essential travel. That might ultimately change to more enforceable measures, but right now that's our advice, to postpone all non-essential travel. The question with the scanners is absolutely right, and there's no one intervention for this virus that will solve all the problem. It's a collection of interventions. So, like I said, the first individual that came into Nigeria was not symptomatic when he came in. He was found, he presented at the doctor's clinic, the doctor understood what he might have, sent him to Lagos. The colleagues in Lagos State collected the sample and then confirmed. So, most likely, transmission happens. What happens is there's an incubation period. That's from when you get the virus to when you become symptomatic. And that's what we call the incubation period. And many people that are said to be asymptomatic are actually within the incubation period. That person from Italy ultimately did get symptoms and then infected one other individual. There's very little transmission that happens with asymptomatic cases, so people that don't have symptoms at all. We've found them. We don't think they contribute a significant part to transmission, because this is a virus that is transmitted by droplets. Droplet means, you sneeze and it comes up, but it drops, so it's not airborne. So yes, it's a collection of efforts together that will lead to a reduction in transmission of this virus.
Okay, Dr. Ikweazu will leave us at some point, but we'll take a break. When we return from the break, we'll take a couple of reports. He will respond to some questions, then at some point we'll excuse him. Quite intriguing that this program is centered around him, but we'll have to plead with you to be with us for some time. So we'll take a break. When we return, we'll take some reports. After the reports, he will respond to some questions, then we'll allow him to go. Stay with us.
Their news and information from more media sources than ever before. Some of the news and information given are fake, unverified, doctored, and manufactured to create confusion, stir disaffection, and cause disunity. Before you believe or share any news, ask yourself, is this real? Is it from a credible source? Is it verified or verifiable? Fake news is dangerous. Whether you do it for fun or for political gains, real people can get hurt. Fake news, don't create it, don't spread it.
This is a public service announcement from NTA.
You can follow us on all our social media platforms: Facebook at NTA Network News, Instagram at NTA Network, Twitter at NTA News Now, YouTube at NTA News Online, or visit www.nta.ng. For live streaming, visit www.nta.ng/live. Now, you can stay updated on the go, be it on your TV, iPhone, laptop, or iPad, or download the NTA mobile application from your Play Store or App Store. NTA, you can beat the rich.
Thanks for staying tuned. We're not done yet. COVID-19 pandemic and the global economy. We told you at the beginning of the program we shall be going around the country to bring you reports to have a feel of what it is like across the country. We begin with Ibadan.
Emerging evidence from the coronavirus outbreak, COVID-19 shows that the right to health is inextricably tied to economic growth, jobs, and other facets of social and economic life. Public institutions like the University of Ibadan have adopted measures in preparedness to checkmate the spread of COVID-19 to the states.
We have put in place proactive measures to make sure that in case anything happens, so the medical team should be able to cope any eventualities.
What we have adopted is what we call education. We keep sending out messages of enlightenment to encourage right action, to encourage activities that will promote health and reduce the burden of disease generally.
From all indications, the shortage of products from China is affecting companies around the world. Nigeria is not left out, as this is having negative impact on the economy of the country.
My Chinese customers, they are in Nigeria here. They cannot come here. They cannot go out anyhow. People will be running here and there.
For solutions, motor parks and markets were visited for more sensitization and enlightenment on how to curtail the spread of the virus.
We are supposed to sneeze into the elbow, and make sure that you contain the sneezing within the elbow this way.
It is believed that all the above steps will check the spread of the virus, thereby minimizing the impacts.
Our next stop is Kano.
With the increase in the number of COVID-19 cases in more than 100 countries across the globe, the World Health Organization has characterized the virus as a pandemic. It is against this backdrop that the Federal Ministry of Health, through the Nigeria Center for Disease Control, NCDC, activated a National Emergency Operations Center in all the 36 states of the country, Kano inclusive.
All the stakeholders have been doing a lot, one of which is trying to screen all people who come from other countries at the airport, which is the main port of entry. The social mobilization component is also taking place so as to contain the epidemic by enlightening people.
It is in light of this development that strategic areas such as the government house, business outlets, and schools within the metropolis have taken measures to guard against the spread of the virus through the use of sanitizers, regular washing of hands, and constant checking of body temperature.
An infrared thermometer. If a person is found to have high temperature, that person needs to be further investigated.
An economic analyst with Kano State College of Education and Preliminary Studies, Sanusi Adamu, spoke on the economic impact of COVID-19.
If we have a situation of this nature, then it will affect the whole economic activities in Kano State in particular, because we cannot import what we have been exporting and we cannot export what we have been exporting.
To ensure effective management of any outbreak of disease, the state government has made available isolation and treatment centers at Ergaya and Aminu Kano Teaching Hospital.
Enugu is next.
Is said to be a major import and trading partner with Nigeria and has the second largest economy in the world. Since the outbreak of coronavirus disease in China, there has been a shortage in supply of imported goods and raw materials from the country into Nigeria, and this has caused a rise in cost of other goods and services from other countries that has not witnessed any outbreak. Most people have also stayed off purchase of clothes, shoes, and other items imported from countries like China, Italy, Asia, and London.
Most of them are increased more than 2,000. Some are 5,000. Some are even 10,000 due to the prices in China are cheaper than the prices in Dubai.
There are several measures put in place to contain the spread of coronavirus, as well as advocacy and sensitization on the hand and respiratory hygiene. However, some of these materials for the hand and respiratory hygiene, such as alcohol-based hand sanitizers and respiratory masks, seem to be unavailable due to panic buying.
Well, since the information spread worldwide, people have been coming, buying as they can be able to afford. The only issue there is the price goes up more than 3 times.
Good news is that the sample came back from the Rural Specialist Hospital at the late hours of Sunday, and as it were, the result turned out to be negative.
The Enugu State government released this cash sum of 20 million naira to the management of the State Isolation Center to ensure that the center is optimally ready to deal with the situation and any emergency that may occur.
Thanks for staying tuned. Our focus once again is COVID-19 pandemic and the global economy. Well, our reports from Ibadan, Kano and Enugu dwells basically on the economics of this whole pandemic. What are your reactions?
Well, we said global, so we'll start from global and come down to Nigeria.
Yes.
But I have to try and be brief. Globally, it's a meltdown. Up until last week, we were looking at $9 trillion being wiped out of the stock of the capital market. But now nobody talks about the number anymore because everybody's lost in the number. What was like 5% drop, now it's 12% a day, it is 11%, it's 10%. So we're no longer talking about the numbers because it has to be in tens of trillions of dollars. But the stock market is one thing, but because Nigeria is assimilated into the global structure, we are feeling the impact. So our stock market is vulnerable. But then you have the oil. China is the biggest buyer outside of America. America is not buying anybody's crude. And they also have their challenges. And for that reason, Saudi Arabia didn't play ball with Russia on the OPEC meeting. So there's a price war. Obviously, America is not ready to play ball with anybody. They'll continue to supply, oversupply. So what we have now is the prospect that the price can actually drop to $20 a barrel. At the moment, it went to 28, 33, went up to 37, and down again to that region. The impact on Nigeria is a major concern because that will affect our benchmark was $57. Now to be operating at less than 20%, $20, less than by, we are more than $20. Means that we have to radically review the budget, and the administration is doing that. In fact, on Wednesday, we had a big meeting in Central Bank, and the Minister of Finance spoke really well and calmed all the nerves and was very, pointed us in the right direction. And this became an opportunity for a big event. It's no longer, this is what happens. We haven't lost a human being yet on corona, But the impact of corona on the economy is global, and also here is devastating. But the fact of the matter is that it became an opportunity where so many sectors, over 500 people were in a meeting, and then they looked at the whole range of sectors that are being affected in different ways. But the biggest challenge that we have is infrastructure, as you know. Because when you have the infrastructure, then people will be keen to invest in your country. Then those who are already in the business will expand. And you know, so the focus in the infrastructure was such that they now decided that they are going to build a new mega company called Infraco. That's Infra Company, PLC, with an initial capitalization of $3 billion. We're looking towards $100 billion somewhere down the line, where the first 4 or 5 people contribute the $1 billion, and then the federal government will put a $2 billion guarantee. And on the basis of that, we'll build a bridge, and if investors will start coming, that is we're talking about institutional investors, pension funds of that sort, will have the comfort. Now, that is monumental opportunity, because the government will give you the first 20 key projects to run with, and then they will open the way. What can I compare that to? Transcorp. You know, Transcorp came along that line. Yeah. And Transcorp is working, and is the marketplace for business in Abuja. But this is something bigger than life. Okay. And then we'll see it. So Corona has triggered this, but it's a huge response to what has become a perennial problem.
How do you tie this to the tweets that said, not minding the negative impact it will have, Nigeria for now should just shut down the economy and concentrate on the health of Nigerians?
People are entitled to their opinions, and people tend to react to depending on how they feel. But we're miles away from what is being said, and the point is that there are areas that are very challenging. Apart from the infrastructure issue, there's aviation. Aviation worldwide was estimated to be losing $113 billion. In the Middle East, $4.9 billion. That's what they're losing. Africa estimated at $400 million. But if you look at the Nigerian aviation industry, you see a ticking time bomb. One, there are 22 airports. Only 2 of them are viable. Lagos accounts for 58% of the revenue. Abuja, 18%. Abuja just breaks even. The remaining 20 airports can't even contribute up to 20%. None of them is viable. The other 3 at international are not viable. What it means is that Lagos is carrying and cross-subsidizing all these other airports. So if FAN comes under pressure and he says, well, we have to cut out, all these airports could close down. And then me and you, we can't go to anywhere. We can't travel to any of your town or village. And that's the only transport system that is working, right? The road is a dead trap. The rail isn't working because you haven't got a comprehensive network. It's just that aviation that we have. Second thing, I appreciate that the governor of Central Bank, under the direction of the government, has reacted. $50 billion on the table, naira on the table. And then also dropping interest rates from 9% to some of that down to 5%, and many other measures. But if you look at the debt of FAN, it's being owed over 53 billion naira by airlines and other services. If they say, look, we're in difficulty, let's just turn the tap, all of these airlines are going to go bust. Can you see? In fact, that they can swallow up that 50 billion naira that CBN is giving. So we have to look at the impact. Globally, 10 trillion tons of goods are moved globally. 3 trillion of that is through air freight. And you've seen what is going on with China. Most people have suspended their flight to China. And China is the powerhouse. He just explained to you how they've disrupted the supply chain. And that also affects aviation. And then passenger traffic, of course, is disrupted. So you now see this industry as one that supports 3 times its size in terms of GDP. And so we have to protect it. How do you protect it? I simply say to the president, he has already asked for them to be exempted from having to remit their revenue, but do something immediately that stop it using fiat. And then when the assembly is ready with their enactment, then that's, otherwise we're going to have far more problem than we expect. If it goes down in Lagos, at least 20 to 30% of Lagos economy is going to be in trouble. Okay. And then you have so many hospitality industry, so many industries that depend on it.
Okay. Dr. Ikwaju, before I let you go, 2 tweets here you respond to, and also, just for emphasis, you need to talk more about, as much as you've told us at the beginning of this program, that the president is working towards making a pronouncement regarding social distancing. But it's very, very crucial here, given the fact that we are very, very traditional when it comes to greetings, interactions. But in Italy, for instance, when they were all asked to stay at home, the team whittled down. In the morning, they recite the national anthem, but you stay at home. I think this morning I cited one of the countries, they do exercises while staying at home. But with this, it works. But quickly, this tweet from Nandom Wuyep says, are scanners used in other public places across Nigeria or only at our ports of entry? Are there trained volunteers on standby if the virus overwhelms the regular health workers? Have we maximized employees' ability to work remotely or from home if the situation warrants? Follow up. Good evening to our guest on Tuesday Live. Is there any support the Nigerian government is giving to pharmaceutical companies with regards to production of vaccines for the biological terrorists to the so-called COVID-19 pharmacist, Umar? I'll leave that to you. Maybe the first one. I touch on social distancing.
Yeah, so on the issue of social distancing, I really, this is not an area that we need to wait for Mr. President to announce and tell us what to do. We need to wait for Mr. President in terms of flights and, the bigger public sector interventions. But in terms of social distancing, the advice is out there. We need to take on that advice, and each of us as individuals carry it out. The reason why you don't have thermal, we are not pushing for thermal scanners all over the local economy is right now all the cases in Nigeria have been imported cases. So the most at-risk point at the moment is airports. And the scanners themselves don't tell you whether you have COVID-19 or not. There are many other causes of fever that the scanners can pick up if you're just going into a hotel somewhere. So the issue really is, this is about detecting importations. Once you come in with a fever, a series of actions take place and a sample is collected, sent to the lab and all of that. To build on a bigger premise before I drop the mic, so to speak, is our level of threat is ultimately dependent on 2 things. What something is causing the risk, and what resilience have we built to absorb that risk. And if we have built sufficient resilience over years, then even if there's a threat, our vulnerability is not as much because we have invested in building up the necessary defenses. One of the most important investments, I think, post-Ebola was the setting up of the Nigeria Center for Disease Control. Many countries don't have a center like this with the expertise, as small as we are, that is being built up to deal with emergencies like this, with the lab staff, the technicians, virologists, microbiologists, and epidemiologists. This is a journey. So we have to keep pushing on this, build up what we're doing at a national level. Don't drop the ball after this epidemic. So I hope that NTA will remember us post the outbreak. We hope that the rest of society will remember some of these messages after the outbreak, because investments in things like NCDC are a painful investment. It's like investing in insurance policy. Because when we buy insurance, we hope never to use it. Because nobody buys insurance hoping that there will be a fire in your home and therefore I will use my insurance to pay for it. We pay for it knowing that that expense will go. We hope not to have a fire, but we're happy to pay for the insurance. And that's the same way we have to think about investments in Nigeria's health security, that these are necessary investments so that we can sleep at night, knowing that there are people thinking about these small viruses. That, there's a lot of talk about closing airports, stopping flights, and we may get to that situation. But there's nothing to say that another virus will not emerge in a few months' time, right? So how often are we going to close our airports and shut the country down? So we have to start thinking a little bit differently about the threats that we face around infectious diseases. Locking every country, blocking their borders, stopping flights, is not going to keep the world safer in the long term. We're mutually dependent on each other. So what we need is solidarity among countries. An unfortunate trend has happened that many countries have gone down a single line of action. The action carried out by Ghana a few days ago, you might argue that they've taken an action in the best interest of their country. And they have the right to do so. But remember, there's free travel across West Africa. So if you take action individually without it being synchronized with other countries around the region, the benefit that you expect to have is minimized. So we're not saying that actions should not be taken. What we're saying is that we must come together at different levels of our regions, either in West Africa or in Africa, and say, listen, how do we take actions with everything considered? So in this case, there's been a lot of uproar today on all social media panels. But I know that the president is taking this very seriously and considering everything that needs to be considered to protect our health. Yes, the few cases that we have is an important consideration, but the president, as a leader of this country, has to consider all other aspects of this. And remember, many people are dependent on travel to stay alive. Every day people are traveling for essential medical care for all sorts of reasons. So I'm not saying one reason outweighs the other. I'm saying let's give the leadership of the country the time they need to make this decision while we do what we need to do in the trenches to protect Nigerians from getting affected.
Can I just add something? Okay. I realize also that the FAN is committed to building 5 hospitals in all the 5 towns, Port Harcourt, Enugu, where we have international airports. So I think it will make a lot of sense if you partner with them. Yes.
Okay, Dr. Dikwe, maybe respond to this.
Yes.
Is there any support the Nigerian government is giving to pharmaceutical companies with regards to production of vaccines for this biological terrorist, so-called COVID-19?
Well, I can't answer the biological terrorist aspect
COVID-19
of this particular tweet, but I can provide some insight as to Nigeria's efforts in terms of building vaccines capacity. Incidentally, I was privileged to have been the executive secretary of the Pharmaceutical Manufacturers Group prior to my appointment as Director General by my principal, President Muhammadu Buhari. And while I was wearing that cap, that was the period they had the meningitis outbreak a few years ago. And PMG MAN was at the forefront of calling out the need for action to develop local capacity in vaccines manufacturing. Chikwe, you would remember, you invited me for a CEPI meeting. And as part of the efforts that PMG MAN put in place then, and as part of government responsiveness, the government of the Federal Republic of Nigeria formed a partnership with the local manufacturers, I think for a tune of about 6 billion naira, and that particular partnership led to the formation of a company called BioVaccines, which is meant for producing vaccines locally. So that is a step a big step in the right direction that the federal government has taken in terms of developing local capacity to manufacture vaccines. Now, in terms of funding, again, I will draw from my experience from my days in PMG-MAN. I'm aware and I'm privy to documents that local manufacturers had made requesting for an intervention fund, pharmaceutical manufacturing expansion and export fund from the government. I can't remember the exact figure, but that discussion has been ongoing. And based on this new interests of the CBN governor, the Ministry of Finance and other key stakeholders, rest assured that NIPRID will pick up the gauntlet again to ensure that that funding gets to local manufacturers to catalyze medicine security in Nigeria.
Thank you so much, Dr. Idigwe. At this point, I must thank Dr. Chikwe Ihekwe-Azu, Director General, Nigeria Center for Disease Control, for being part of the program tonight.
Thank you very much.
Well, we'll take a break now. When we return, the conversation continues. COVID-19 pandemic and the global economy. Don't go away.
from more media sources than ever before. Some of the news and information given are fake, unverified, doctored, and manufactured to create confusion, stir disaffection, and cause disunity. Before you believe or share any news, ask yourself, is this real? Is it from a credible source? Is it verified or verifiable? Fake news is dangerous. Whether you do it for fun or for political gains, real people can get hurt. Fake news, don't create it, don't spread it.
This is a public service announcement.
The global economic growth expected to be 1.6% in 2020 and 3.2% in 2021 has been sharply adjusted downwards as a result of the outbreak of the coronavirus. For many years, China has become an important market, a source of tourism, and a supplier of consumer goods to other countries. To ensure that men and materials from China and other countries affected by the virus don't find a way to Rivers State, most entry points, especially airports and seaports, are stationed with port health officials for intensive screening.
I trust Nigeria on this because I can remember vividly during the time of February they take precautions and measures, and what I'm seeing here is quite impressed.
Any vessel coming comes with a yellow flag, and when you see the yellow flag, that means the ship has not been cleared. So when the port head goes on board, they check, and if everything is okay, they will now bring the yellow flag down and now give the opportunity for other workers to go in. And if there's anybody with any sign or symptom, the port health will now take the person to the disease control center.
There is no confirmed case of COVID-19 within Rivers State and none in the confines of the University of Port Harcourt Teaching Hospital.
The economic implication of the coronavirus outbreak is that many goods are no longer available and traders are forced to rely on old stock, creating chances for scarcity when the supply elapses.
When there is a scarcity in goods, it's going to rise up. The price will rise up.
With the sales of last year and this year, trying to travel, one cannot travel and you stock money in the bank. Can't even travel to transact any business for the year 2020.
With this situation, there are indications that as the global value chain in which China plays a crucial role is being seriously disrupted by COVID-19, the huge adverse economic effect is already having its toll across the globe.
We take the report from Maiduguri.
Since pronouncement of a confirmed index case of COVID-19 in Lagos, Nigeria, Borno State government has redoubled efforts in ensuring the citizenry are well protected against any outbreak of diseases by putting machineries on ground to include upgrade of an isolation center, in addition to training of health personnel across the state.
Our joker is to ensure that those who are likely to have contact with the IDP camps are the expatriates coming in. And once we're able to screen it properly at the airports, we believe that we will be able to pick this to a larger extent without even getting it into town.
As part of efforts to curtail the menace of COVID-19, Federal Ministry of Health through Port Health Services, in collaboration with government, have taken stringent steps to screen all passengers coming into the state at the Maiduguri International Airport, in addition to awareness amongst drivers who operate at designated motor parks in the state. Also, Borno State Command of the Nigerian Security and Civil Defense Corps has embarked on safety sensitization and basic hygiene practices in schools and other strategic places within the state capital.
Where we visited motor parks, public schools, to inform the public on the need to do the needful.
Start shaking or collecting money, we do wash hand. So we reach out, you wash yourself clean.
We take yet another report from Aba.
Believed to be one of the final destinations for goods imported from China and some European countries. From textiles to leather and other household items, a typical Monday in Aba is always characterized by commercial activities, attracting buyers from different parts of the country and beyond. Since the outbreak of coronavirus, many thought it would not have effects on trading activities in Aba, but the spread of the virus to other countries of the world, including Africa, the fear is beginning to be felt on not just trading activities, but on socials, which has indirectly sent a wrong signal to the market and visitors.
A lot of the importations that are done from China, nobody can travel there again. So we are stuck here. Somewhere there is locked up. So those that have goods are hoarding it. They are increasing the price. Even the ordinary surgical face mask is increasing price from 500 now to 8,000 naira for one small packet.
If this pandemic continues, definitely the whole economy, both in Aba and in the Abia State environment, will be drastically affected.
As the virus continues to spread, causing lockdown in some countries, especially China and some European countries, where they have business ties with Aba business community, business observers say it is important that World Health bodies and other health experts to focus on ways to stamp out the virus.
Wash your hand thoroughly, use sanitizers where necessary, don't sneeze into the air, don't sneeze into your palms, like people are demonstrating, sneeze into your dress on your hands.
Socioeconomic activities, no doubt, have been affected in Aba, but everyone is optimistic that the end of the virus is near, which will ensure that there won't be complete global recession, as they noted, will be worse on developing countries.
Thanks for staying tuned. Our focus once again is COVID-19 pandemic and the global economy. Well, the Director General of the Center for Disease Control left us, Dr. Adigwe. Now, will this be a big challenge and lesson for your institute and other research institutes in Nigeria? Do we need to wait until we have this before we think proactively?
Well, for us at NIPRID, we've actually been quite proactive. We didn't sit down to wait for coronavirus. At NIPRID, one of the key things that we've done over the past year and a half is focusing on getting research outputs into products and processes that touch people's lives. So shortly after I was appointed by President Muhammadu Buhari, we quickly identified that there were a significant amount of publications that had articulated research output, but which hadn't translated into outcomes that will impact on people's lives. So we said that rather than sit back and wait for the industry or people who will use the research to come to us to use the research, what we will start doing is take our research output to the people who need the research. And one of the things we did was to articulate a conceptual processing protocol, which basically enabled us map natural resources across 36 states of the country, which can quickly be processed into products that will impact on people's health while also providing livelihood for people who live within that locality. And Nigeria is blessed in terms of natural resources, and I'm talking about the flora that we have. The different zones and soil conditions and climatic regions across Nigeria encourages the growth of very high quality plants, in different parts of Nigeria. So based on the work that we did on the contextual processing protocol, we started to reach out to state governors to say, you have plant 1, 2, 3 in your locality. Plant 1, 2, 3 have the potential, if processed, to give us product 1, 2, 3. And in that process, the people within your state will be empowered economically. We will be able to use the training to build their capacity. We will be able to use it to generate income for the state. So that's what we've been doing with our contextual processing protocol. And so far, we've engaged about 10 states. And, we've reached advanced levels with a few of them. So NIPRID hadn't been sitting down and waiting for coronavirus. And in terms of coronavirus, you'll be interested to find out that we've actually started to put together a model, that can start to look at phytomedicines that we have in our library that may have either activity or be an adjunct, to treatment of someone who comes down with this coronavirus. So, for instance, NIPRID has copyrighted a product which is immune modulatory. So, as you know, the coronavirus, when it hits an individual, it's more severe in either the elderly or people who are immune compromised. So, NIPRID has a product called Niprimune, which helps to bolster the immune system. And we're now trying to ensure that we, superimpose this particular product to a profile of someone who has been affected by coronavirus, so that, God forbid, if it gets here, we can say to government and to the people of Nigeria, here is a product that you can use as an adjunct. So these are just two examples of a cornucopia of different things that we've been doing in NIPRID.
Okay, we are not done yet. We'll take more reports, beginning this time from Sokoto.
While recent reports of COVID-19 indicates that Europe is now the epicenter of the disease, authorities in Sokoto State, Nigeria, are beefing up measures to guard against its spread after 2 cases recorded in Lagos.
Designated 2 centers for isolation of patients, one in the teaching hospital and the other one at the infectious diseases hospital, Amanawa. And we shall intensify surveillance, and this is very important, working closely with the NCDC and the Port Health that are on ground here with us, especially at point of interest at the borders, at the Ilela border, Sabon Birni border, as well as the international airport.
Officials here in NYSC orientation camp in Wamako are not leaving anything to chance as they step up precautionary measures by taking temperatures of new corps members coming into the camp. While enlightenment at port of entry, such as motor parks, remain low, border communities in the state have intensified enlightenment campaign.
We even sensitize the people for the way they are taking care of themselves, environmental sanitation, wash hand before eating, wash hand after eating, before entering the toilet, and so on and so forth.
Meanwhile, socio-economic activities continues as the authorities remain alert.
Abeokuta is next.
Earlier, by the Honorable Minister of Health, I wish to inform you that all 40 contacts of the index case under the quarantine have tested negative to a series of tests for coronavirus.
That's a major breakthrough for a state which had been in the news for a not too good reason since February 27, when the index case of COVID-19, an Italian, was discovered in the state. Its new status notwithstanding, health officials in Ogun State say they can't afford to drop the ball in the campaign against the spread of the virus. Apart from deploying a social media app dedicated to increasing the capacity of health workers and enhancing multi-sectoral emergency operations, the state government has also distributed preventive kits to public facilities in the state. The campaign will be well complemented when members of the public take personal hygiene and other safety precautions more seriously.
Market women, the religious bodies, mosques, churches have been sensitized on how to combat coronavirus.
By now, I expect that all the media houses in Ogun State should be running ads sensitizing the citizenry about the dangers inherent in coronavirus.
Surveillance around Abeokuta, the state capital, shows that life is normal for a state that just caught a break from negative spotlight. While many of the residents are aware of the status of the virus as a global pandemic with increasing fatality, they are not yielding to fear as schools, banks, markets and other public places remain open for business.
Tuesday Live is an audience participative program. We also took our microphones to the streets to feel a pulse of what Nigerians are saying and understand about COVID-19 pandemic.
It has an effect on the economy because we've seen the news of the worldwide stock markets collapsing. A lot of the world's production goes on in China, and with parts of China shutting down over the last couple of months, that has led to a reduction in production of different sorts of things. And so the businesses that rely on those things being produced have obviously been affected by this shutdown of activity.
It has affected most of the activities because most activities are being shut down. Like schools are being shut down as a result of the disease, the virus. Schools are being shut down as a result of the virus. And most gatherings, people don't gather together anymore. That really causes panic.
Economy has to do with business. And business are all about movement. And when movement is restricted, it affects supply and demand. The other area, maybe based on edible things like food, people will be fearing whether how it's being packaged, those that are packaging it, those involved in packaging especially food items, because nobody wants to die and everybody wants to go to heaven.
The impact on the economies is very, very bad because the negative aspect of it, a lot of the business are being shutting down. The flights are not flying. Most of the African countries are shutting down most of their business centers, churches, mosques. In fact, the means of joining together form of business exhibition are not going on. So some of those things are creating a lot of negative impact on the economies.
They have already affected Nigeria economically. Business is not moving and other things involved. And people we are panic to travel from one place to another. People traveling outside country, they are in this country, they are not going anywhere. So politically and economically, things are stagnant, things are not moving because of this disease called coronavirus.
Globally, it has caused a lot of catastrophe in the economy of our nation. Not only our nation, other nations that we're having bilateral relationships with them, that we normally used to have economic activities with them, it has affected seriously. Most of the goods that are imported into this country have been stopped.
Those are the views of Nigerians. And back to the studio, Professor Kenife. Now, with this development, now you heard me ask Dr. Adigwe, what is the lesson for NIPRI? Now, for Nigeria, we talked so much about consuming made in Nigeria, encouraging local production. Now, with what has played out, it happened in China. It has dovetailed into Europe and spreading further, although a lot of efforts have been made to mitigate it. If we encourage local production, will the effect be this high?
No, of course not. In fact, let's unpack what has happened between China, Europe, and America, and then you could see the answer to your question. One measure of the health of the industry is called the Purchaser Managers Index. Now, for China, it dropped from 52 down to 26. I thought it would have even dropped to 20 or so by now, but as I'm talking about as of a few days ago. And the non-manufacturers Purchasers Index also dropped, took a dive to 29%. And America also has the same. They're from well over 50. Once it's less than 50, it shows that there's contraction in the manufacturing. America went down to 49. So it affects America as well as it affects UK. EU are dependent. You know what they do? If you take an aviation, a car, there are thousands of parts in a car. And there are hundreds of companies supplying all those parts. So what has happened is that the disruption of the supply chain means that they can't complete the assembly of one car because one or two parts are still not there. And that's the same. In America, in Europe, it's all affected. And the same with aircraft. So everybody's affected in a way that we have not thought before. I can see some of the importers screaming because they focused on import. And all the things we talk about, import substitution, they don't want to know. But now they're taking the heat. And that says so much for what Dr. Adigwe's work that should be supported. Because here they're trying to build local capacity. And pharmaceutical is a key strategy area for Africa, promoted by Africa Union. And even within ECOWAS, I have worked on pharmaceutical industry in ECOWAS for the region. So it's a high priority area where we are spending a lot of money. And we could reverse all of that if only we could find the ways and means of putting the partnerships together and having the development partner round table so that we can look at how we can resource that. And I'm glad that he's also looking at some local manufacturing options in terms of using much of our natural materials. Even some, I'm sure that even some of the technology he has may have also been organic. It possibly could be organic as well, which means our own natural resources. So it's really time that we focused on that. And I'm sure we may also, but you can access existing intervention funds because even though they are prioritized on 10 presidential value chains, there's no reason why it could not be used in organizing the primary raw materials. Because, using our growers approach. Wherever you want to do it, the states you want to do it, you can use our grower approach, where you are the aggregator and all our growers growing the crops. And we've seen some things like hibiscus making their way. We've seen some other ingredients that are natural. I heard about bitter leaf combined with a saint leaf and the extract used to do something. I'm not sure whether it was even to do with the coronavirus, but there are things. And even Senegal has produced something that China is using now, and they're saying that is helping them make recoveries. A lot of people are recovering from Senegalese doctors that produce something, and China has tested it and is working in China. And also here, Professor Wu did something, and they are testing that in America. So, it is our time. It's our time to explode, because we have all those natural ingredients here.
Okay, Dr. Dikwe.
Just to
add this. Conclude.
Just to ride on what he said. There are 5 levels of a country's pharmaceutical maturity. The most advanced is people who do original R&D, followed by people who manufacture APIs, followed by people who do finished product manufacturing. Then you have people who do packaging, and then people who do importation. Majority of the countries in Africa vary between importation and finished product manufacturing. Nigeria is in the middle, finished product manufacturing, and we've been at that level for close to 2 decades now. And our argument is that we should have done a backward integration to APIs and subsequent reverse engineering, or whatever you want to call it, value chain addition from finished product manufacturing to production of APIs and to original R&D. And I'll tell you why this is particularly painful to us at NIPRID. NIPRID has an API model laboratory where the thinking was that we would use petrochemicals from Nigeria's refineries and put it through our model laboratory and bring out APIs and use that model laboratory to train Nigerians and demonstrate to the world that production of APIs is possible in Nigeria. But we've needed less than 100 million to complete and then begin that particular project. And we've been reaching out to people for years now, and nobody has any interest in engaging. In the last 1.5 years that I was appointed, we actually went up to making a presentation to the top management of NMPC. Literally, myself and my team sat down and they had all the directors and technical staff from the 4 refineries, and they challenged us, and we stood and proved our point, and we were just about to move to the next level of that partnership when there was a management change in NMPC. This is just to show you how far we've gone, and this was months before coronavirus now dried up API, exportation to Nigeria. So we've been thinking along that line. And so, yes, this is a wake-up call, but it's something that every stakeholder, for that API project, if NIPRID, NNPC, and the Ministry of Finance take upon it as a project, in 18 to 24 months, you will see some outcome from API manufacturing in Nigeria.
Okay, then to the question. As we wrap up, would we say with coronavirus pandemic in the world, though Nigeria just so far just 3 cases confirmed, and from all indication, the victims are doing well and responding, do we lose hope?
I think we should be cautiously optimistic. Okay. So, the government is doing everything it can, to ensure that there is no spread within the country. There are 5 laboratories that have the capacity to quickly detect the virus. There are isolation centers in all major cities. Screening is going on. There's a lot of, just like your reports have shown, there's a lot of information out there. This tempo should not be reduced. As far as we keep up this tempo, there are leaflets going out, people know what to do, there is social distancing, we should be cautiously optimistic. However, we must take two lessons away from this coronavirus outbreak. Frequently, we underestimate the role of healthcare in our lives. Coronavirus has demonstrated to us that without health, you have nothing. You have nothing. I mean, I would argue with people who, would place things like politics, policy, economics before healthcare. If your producer, for instance, had 3 interviews lined up, one a political interview, another one an economic interview, and the third a healthcare interview, health is usually put at the back burner. It's wrong. If you do not have health, you have nothing. So we need to prioritize health in everything that we do. Secondly, medicine's security. Unless you can determine how your medicines are manufactured and distributed for your people, you will not be able to guarantee sustainable access to medicines. Nigeria, amongst the other African countries, is on top in terms of pharmaceutical manufacturing. So we have the potential not only to address the needs of our population, we have the potential to emerge as the hub for pharmaceutical manufacturing for the whole of Africa. That is a market that's worth $50 billion a year. So we need to prioritize medicine security.
Okay, Dr. Kenife.
Well, I agree with him. It's music. What he's saying is music to my ear because I've worked on that agenda.
So let's look at the economic perspective of it.
It begins from there because we spend substantial amount of forex importing those APIs. And it's not good news. It's not good news that our country is hopelessly dependent on imported active pharmaceutical ingredients. And all we do is we import them and pour water to make syrups or whatever, and then you get starch-based to compound them into tablets. It's like, what value are you adding? So we have to get to that stage. But again, there are high politics as well involved in that, because you raise the question, why is it that in terms of procurement, the same American company that has a branch in Nigeria or in Africa, they will not approve the product made by them within Africa when it comes. There's a big politics in there. And then also you ask the question, why is it that much of the so-called resources coming to us to attack some of the diseases still go back buying only the medicine that is brought from foreign countries. So there are politics.
Of trade outside drugs.
Sorry?
In terms of the...
generally, in terms of trade, I mean, we've seen what the damage it has done to the oil industry, and then the potential to cause even more disruption, because what are you going to do if you are producing crude, producing crude at $30 and the price is going to go down to $20? What are you going to do? What are you going to do? And then you still expect us to subsidize the petrol? I mean, the whole mathematics is going to fall apart. So we're going to have to critically look at, I know we're all waiting for Dangote refinery to come on stream, but meanwhile, we have to critically look at what is going on with 75 private refineries that have license and not producing. Then we have artisanal refiners that are refining, and then they are selling their refined products to the marketers. The marketers will deposit, and then they will buy from them at discount, and then they bring it in and claim the subsidy on it. We have to revisit all of that. Okay. And we also have to revisit the cost of the cost of crude extraction. Why would it take $15 to $18 in most of the Middle East countries producing oil, and it's $30 in Nigeria? We have to look at that, look at those costs.
Well, at this point, I must say, gentlemen, so far so good. Dr. Obi Adigwe, Director General, Chief Executive Officer of the National Institute for Pharmaceutical Research and Development. It was nice having you on Tuesday Live.
Thank you, Omeni.
And Professor Kenny Faye, Macroeconomic Policy Analyst. Thanks for being on the program.
Thank you, Omeni. Thank you very much.
We looked at COVID-19 pandemic and global economy, and we thank you for your tweets and also those who put in their calls. We appreciate you. That's it on the program. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.